President Emmerson Mnangagwa says Zimbabwe is championing social inclusion and equality through the national social protection, disability and gender policies to achieve sustainable empowerment of communities. Now, in his contribution to a roundtable in Daba that was held under the topic, Strengthening the Three Pillars of Social Development, poverty eradication, full and productive employment, and decent work for all and social inclusion on Tuesday, the president said Zimbabwe, despite being constrained by economic sanctions and effects of climate change, has been uplifting its people toward Vision 2030 to become an upper middle class economy.
Delivering his statement at the high-level summit in Doha, President Emmerson Mnangagwa shared Zimbabwe's story of resilience, one marked by significant progress in poverty reduction, education, and social inclusion. On social inclusion and equality, President Mnangagwa said these are both constitutional and moral imperatives implemented through policies such as the National Social Protection Policy, Disability Policy, and the Gender Policy.
Poverty levels declined from 62% in 1995 to 38.3% in 2019. Primary education enrollment has risen to 88%, while adult literacy is 93.6%, and life expectancy is at 64.7 years.
The president also contributed to a round table on strengthening the three pillars of social development, poverty eradication, decent work for all, and social inclusion, where he called for unity in fighting inequality and promoting human dignity. Beyond highlighting social development achievements, President Mnangagwa used the Doha platform to appeal for international support for Zimbabwe's bid for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council for the 2027 to 2028 term.
Let the Doha Declaration reignite hope for the main peoples of the world still waiting for justice and dignity. Let it affirm that development is not a privilege, but a universal right. Zimbabwe is a friend to all and an enemy to none. We stand ready to work with all nations to build peaceful justice.
The country formally launched its bid a month ago and has already secured support from 134 member states, surpassing the 128 votes required to win the seat. In Doha, the president also held bilateral talks with Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani and Mozambican Prime Minister Maria Benvinda Levi, deepening Zimbabwe's diplomatic engagements. For Zimbabwe, the summit provided yet another platform to strengthen global partnerships aimed at building a better world and a greater Zimbabwe. For ZTN Prime, I'm Iben Mabunda.
Now, for an analysis of the president's address, we are now joined live by international relations expert Lazarus Sauti. Lazarus, good evening, and thank you so much for making the time and joining us on News Plus. Now, we're talking about the president's speech. What is the significance of Zimbabwe's attendance at the Second World Social Development Conference that was being held in Doha?
Okay, thank you. So you realize that the attendance by His Excellency President Emmerson Mnangagwa at this year's Summit on Social Development was a diplomatic masterclass in the sense that he managed to pitch the national interest of Zimbabwe and cascade it to the global audience. In his speech at the Doha, President Emmerson Mnangagwa touched on certain issues that are of paramount importance, not only to Zimbabweans, but to most countries in the global south. For instance, he talked about poverty eradication, and he said Zimbabwe managed to reduce the levels of poverty in this country since 1995 from, say, 62% to 38.3%. And from that statement alone, it shows that the government of Zimbabwe Zimbabwe is doing its best to lift the lives of ordinary citizens from abject poverty to prosperity, and that is in line with the government policies such as the National Development Strategy 1 and the upcoming strategy number 2, as well as the vision of the government of Zimbabwe, that is to elevate the livelihoods of people to an upper middle class society by 2030.
Now, I hear you, Lazarus. Now, how important then was the conference agenda for Zimbabwe and for Africa as a whole?
Okay, so as you can pick from his statement, that 3 key issues are of importance, that are number 1, poverty eradication, number 2, fair employment, and number 3, social inclusion. Those are key ingredients towards peace, security, and sustainable development in any community. So when it comes to social inclusion, President Emmerson Mnangagwa clearly stated that the country is doing enough to make sure that people who are marginalized are well catered for. He mentioned children, he mentioned girls and women, he mentioned persons with disabilities, and he said that the country is trying to have social policies that are transformative, that are empowering to those groups. And on the very same issue, you also talked about the core of a family towards sustainable development. And if we can have a clear reading of his statement, you will realize that what he talked about was how the family can play a very important role towards unity and social cohesion in Zimbabwe. Then on issues to do with the fair employment, he said the country has crafted so many policies in line with the International Labour Organization principles to also empower the youth specifically and uplift them from abject poverty, the 3rd most important killer that he mentioned, and that was also in sync with the objectives of the summit.
Now, Lazarus, lastly, before we let you go, now, Zimbabwe took this opportunity to further its agenda for a non-permanent UN Council seat. How important is that?
So you realize that on a diplomatic strategy level, the president managed to frame the country's UN security bid for 27 to 28. The reason why I'm saying so is because he clearly mentioned that there are so many issues that are affecting Zimbabwe, and these issues are also affecting other countries from the global south. He mentioned the issues to do with the climate change. He mentioned the issues to do with uneven financial playing ground, financial institutions promoting development in global north countries at the expense of global south. And he also mentioned issues to do with the reforms of the financial system in the world. So by so doing, he represented the issues that are affecting not only Zimbabwe, but also other countries in the global south. And that was a clear plea to countries in the global south to support Zimbabwe's bid to join the United Nations Security Council as one of the non-permanent countries. And Zimbabwe needs 2/3 majority. And from his angling of those issues, we are now so clear that his move was so strategic.